All right, welcome everyone to the onX Backcountry 101 Master the App snow session. So this masterclass is going to be pretty devoted to going over how to plan a backcountry tour and how to use the onX Backcountry app in the snow. And also for everyone here, just so you know, somebody in this class will be walking away with a Weston Splitboard or a pair of skis. And we'll give you instructions on how to enter that. We'll be drawing the winner at the end of this webinar, so make sure that you tune into the end so you can get in your hands. But also, if you can't make it to the end, that is not a requirement. So we'll start with some introductions. I'm Matt Madick. I'm a backcountry marketing manager on the onX Backcountry team. And, I live in Carbondale, Colorado. I love getting out on my Splitboard. I love riding my mountain bike. And I love working for a company where I can just like nerd out at maps and plan great adventures. Yeah, it's a really, really awesome opportunity to be able to talk to maps. And also I want to introduce Sarah MacGregor. Here's my introduction for Sarah MacGregor. With almost 2 decades as an educator and guide on rivers, rocks, and snowy summits, Sarah is committed to elevating others to become leaders in the outdoor space. She's an area avalanche educator and is trained by the American Mountain Guides Association in Splitboard, Alpine, and rock disciplines. Being among the only women AMGA trained Splitboard guides in the United States, she actively makes it her goal to change that by mentoring others to do the same. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. There could not be a better person tonight to guide us through this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt. So stoked to be here. Appreciate it. All right.
Nice. So here's just kind of a breakdown of what we're going to be going through today. The first is an introduction and kind of what we've already been going through. The next is I'm going to show off a handful of brand new features we have at onX Backcountry that have come out fairly recently that we haven't had a real good chance to talk about yet. After that, we'll be going over kind of a simple instruction on just how to orient yourself using the phone app. And then once we get through there, Sarah's going to pull us through a tour, how to plan a tour using onX Backcountry. I'm going to pull it back and we're going to work into how to make your phone ready for offline use, making sure you download your maps and make sure that all your GPX files and everything you built with your crew is all synced up on all your devices. And then we're going to do the giveaway and the QA all the way at the end. So for everyone in this masterclass, if you don't have onX Backcountry yet, here's a promo code. This will give you 30% off an onX Backcountry Premium or Elite membership. So yeah, so enter here and get set up. It's really useful to join us as we go and follow along with our routes. And we'll also be sharing out some of the links so you can actually import the routes that we build today into your folders. And then at long last, I know a lot of you are here for the awesome giveaway. This is your way to enter. So we're giving away a pair of Weston Skyline carbon skis or a Ridgeline Split. And we're going to be drawing the winners at the very, very end of this masterclass. So stay tuned. Yeah, being here at the very end is no requirement to win, but it would be a lot funner to announce the winner if you're here so you can chime into the chat and get all stoked. So yeah, so enter this. We'll also be showing this at the end of the presentation as well. And Kobe's also putting a lot of these links into the chat. So look into there. So I'm starting with what's new at onX Backcountry. We have been very, very hard at work adding new features into our app. And one of the ones I'm most excited about moving into the winter is we have a handful of new snow guidebooks. So if you've been in the onX Backcountry app and you're curious, like, where do you get these backcountry ski lines from that you have in your app? The answer is that we source them from reputable guidebook authors who are often professionals who've been guiding in these areas for an extended period of time. So we're partnering predominantly with Beacon Guidebooks, but we're also pulling in a bunch of content for a handful of other authors around the country. And what makes these so cool is that we, take a printed guidebook in its physical form, and we give it a very dynamic experience by putting snow tell stations, avalanche reports, and things like recent imagery to give you a much better idea of what the current conditions are, if these areas are actually a good idea to ride in the particular day, and kind of what the current status of these areas is. So the new ones that we just added in the app, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, is Mount Hood, Tahoe, Taos and Santa Fe, and then Marble, Colorado, which is in my backyard. And then coming soon, we have additional guidebook content coming out in Vail Pass, Monarch Pass. We have some new lines in Crested Butte. We have the Indian Peaks, James Peak Wilderness, the Wasatch Highest, And then the book Backcountry Skiing, California's Eastern Sierras. I was just in the Eastern Sierras last weekend. It was awesome. And then the Peaks and Couloirs of Southwest Montana. We've also added a new activity mode for climbing. So in I think 2021, onX acquired what we call the adventure project sites. So that's your mountain project, your mountain bike project, your hiking project, and your powder project. And we actually just integrated a new climb activity mode that shows, you can see these little icons right over here, and it'll show where climbing routes are based on the map, as well as photos, descriptions, comments, and it shows you approach trails and everything like that, and makes your route finding experience a lot easier when you're looking through the app. And then one of the other things that's awesome in comparison with like Mountain Project is you can see these routes in 3D, and you can really just get a better idea of like where you're actually going. We've also added, as part of our, adventure projects applications, a mountain bike activity mode. This one I'm incredibly excited about, because it puts all of the, mountain bike project trails into one place. And once again, you can see these in 3D, you can visualize your ride, and then you can use the advanced tools that we'll show later, such as Route Builder, to customize your mountain bike ride. And instead of like not knowing your distance and your elevation by like linking together a handful of different trails, you can build your own route. And then again, seeing this in 3D, like this trail in Sedona is awesome. And it looks really cool when you see it popped out in 3D. And then this is the big one. So we've been hard at work creating this Avalanche terrain exposure scale layer. And it's a fairly new concept. So this is going to be a very brief introduction to this. We have a lot more marketing communications coming in surrounding it. But we have been working really hard on this and working with the smartest people in the industry to kind of validate it and to make sure that what we've created is representative of different terrains. So first, what is AITS? So AITS is the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale, and it's a scale used to categorize the severity of avalanche exposure, strictly based on the landscape and regardless of snowpack conditions. So this layer won't exactly update if the avalanche conditions are more strong, but it actually gives you a better indicator and a new language to communicate in when you're looking at avalanche terrain. So why was AITS created? AITS was created it was created after a avalanche incident on February 1st of 2003, when 17 students from a Calgary area private school were engulfed in an avalanche in Glacier National Park, and 7 of those students died. In the following months, Parks Canada Backcountry Avalanche Risk Review worked to find a path forward and determine to prevent future incidents. So how has AITS been implemented? So Parks Canada has developed and implements the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale in 2005, which provides a framework to comprehensively evaluate, describe, and communicate the complexities of avalanche terrain exposure scale. So traditionally, this avalanche terrain exposure scale has been physical maps that were hand drawn by guides in these areas and people, analyzing this terrain. And as a way to scale it, onX Backcountry has developed an Auto8 layer. So what Auto8 Layer is it's using an algorithm that leverages 11 different terrain parameters, including slope angle, forest cover, and overhead hazard, to assign a terrain classification. And this basically allows us to make this scale out to a much broader audience and to cover a lot more terrain. So, cool, we have a computer model. Awesome. Computers make mistakes. We all know that. So how are we localizing our model? onX Backcountry, we've been working really closely with local avalanche professionals from across the country to refine our layer and what the computer gives us based on local and historic avalanche knowledge to each individual region. So as a limiting factor, as we continue to expand the coverage in this area, we're actually waiting until we have a human to validate these layers to make sure that what we're providing our users are actually accurate and representative of what people have experienced in these areas. So I just said a lot of big words. Here's a little bit more of a simple way to look at it. And Kobe, if you could throw in to the doc, okay, I'll open this one up. You could throw into the doc that link. I provide a link that gives a little bit more context to AITS. Again, there's a lot to learn here, and there's a lot we'll be talking about in terms of this, but here's the simplified way of looking at it. So the 8 scale that we've implemented has 4 levels. It has simple terrain, challenging terrain, complex terrain, and extreme terrain. And we're representing those layers based on these colors here. So this is your green. It's simple terrain. It's exposure to low angle or primarily forested terrain. Some forest openings may involve the runout zones of infrequent avalanches, and terrain traps may exist. Many options, but there's also many options to eliminate or reduce your exposure. So if you look at the map here, you can see this is Crested Butte. And some of these more meadowy areas, not only is there low slope angle, but there's good tree coverage and you're not below overhead hazards. So that's generally what you'd see the green for. Here's the blue terrain. So this is challenging terrain. This is exposure to well-defined avalanche paths, starting zones, terrain traps, or overhead hazards. Options exist to reduce or eliminate exposure with careful route finding. So if you look here, like one of the inputs into the 8's model is tree coverage. And you can actually see like some of these areas that are in the green, such as this approach right here, because of the tree coverage. And, you know, even though it isn't similar slope angle, it has a lower 8's rating than this area over here that's more of an open bowl. So that's kind of like where the line can be drawn a lot of times with the challenging aspect. We'll bump over to complex. So complex is exposure to multiple overlapping avalanche paths or large expanses of steep open terrain and sustained exposure to overhead hazard. So this is many avalanche starting zones and terrain traps with minimal options to reduce exposure. And you can see that here on the top of Gothic Mountain. Just a lot of open area, a lot of different complex slope angles that can trigger in different aspects, and even some micro terrain. And then this is your extreme terrain. Exposure to very steep faces with cliffs, spines, couloirs, crevasses, and sustained overhead hazard. And there's no options to reduce exposure, and even a small avalanche can be fatal. So if you look in here, you see a lot more of these cliff bands and really, really steep terrain that is just pretty extreme. So yeah, be on the lookout. Like there's a lot to learn with this. We'll show just a little bit about how you can utilize the 8's layer in our tour plan here as we go further into the class here. But I'm incredibly excited about this layer. I think it's going to not only provide a handful of new tools to look at, but it'll also change the vocabulary in which you can communicate with your partners in the backcountry. So instead of saying like, oh, that terrain looks spooky or scary or steep, you can actually start using words like that terrain looks simple, that terrain looks challenging, that terrain looks complex. And it can actually create a better language for us to all communicate with. And yeah, for people asking about the layer, we are shooting for a December release, probably earlier in the month. So I'm excited to see that come out, and I think it's going to really change things. So, and then yeah, sure. So also the other piece too that might limit, you know, the adoption of if this layer's out in your zone is if we have 8's coverage. As I mentioned before, we're working on getting humans to validate these layers. So some certain areas might be a little bit longer to get these layers. But when we go to launch, these are the areas that will have coverage. So Colorado has an extensive group, Southwest Montana, Utah, and then we're going to work with additional avalanche centers in different areas to expand this as far as we can in the first year. Cool. All right.
So much, Matt. Yeah, the Auto8 layer is super sweet. And I'm excited to dive into it. But first, yeah, we're talking about trip planning today. And one of the most important parts about trip planning is what you do before you actually get into the field. And so I really love this model, the Raisin Swiss cheese model of accident causation, because as you can see, there's just a bunch of layers of Swiss cheese in between us right now and an accident happening in the future. And there are a lot of things that we can do before we even get into the field, such as tour planning, learning how to tour plan. Y'all are ahead of the curve by attending this webinar right now. Packing your gear, training, getting proper avalanche education, practicing your skills, meal prepping, making sure you're properly fueled in the field. I don't know about you, but I'm an awful partner when I'm hungry, and all sorts of things that can help you. The idea is that our brains are much better able to make good decisions when we're at home, because as soon as we get into the field, there are a lot of stressors that are present that can inhibit our ability to make good decisions. And some of those things could be things like temperature or social pressure or not really understanding your gear or athleting. I use that as a verb, or which is to say just like trying to keep up with your partner. When you're too focused on athleting, your awareness goes down and you can't pay attention to a lot of the observations that really matter in way of keeping you safe and out of avalanche terrain. And like I said, there's a lot of things that can cause stress. So it's important for us to make as many decisions as possible before we even get into the field. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Cool. So number one on the docket is we assemble our crew, and we need to identify the goals, our abilities, our risk tolerance, our vulnerabilities, and we have to identify what we don't know, because this will all inform what terrain we choose to ski or snowmobile in, or whatever mode of travel that you're doing. So let's just start. Like, Matt, you and I are going to get out in the field. Like, what goals do you have?
Well, I'm a little out of shape because I haven't skinned in a while. I found that out as I was skinning up Snowmass for the first time this year. So something kind of mellow to get the legs warmed up, I would say. And then, yeah, just also don't want to get a new core shot on my brand new Splitboard. That's another factor, but
yeah, I also would prefer not to get a core shot, but more than that, I think it's just more fun to choose areas that have good snow. So my goal is to find good snow. My goal is to not get avalanched, is to not get involved in an avalanche. And I appreciate you kind of bringing up your abilities. Yeah, it's early season. We're still kind of getting warmed up. And this is important to take into consideration, because like if you are, later in the season where there is better coverage and you're considering an objective, you need to make sure that your partner has the abilities required for the objective. So if it's a really consequential objective and you're wanting to reduce your exposure to a consequence, or like reduce the amount of time you're spending in avalanche terrain, then you need a partner who is not going to fall while descending, for example. So you need to make sure that the abilities match the objective. We also need to make sure our risk tolerance matches the objective. What do you think? Like, what kind of tolerance do you have to risk when we get out in the field together?
I think pretty low this time of year. I mean, we got a long season and a long life ahead of me. So my risk tolerance is pretty low. I know in Colorado, there's already been a handful of avalanche observations and incidents. And I'd prefer to not cause one of those as well. So looking at the avalanche report and making a plan based on that is definitely on my list.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I'm totally down to keep a low risk tolerance. And that might mean we just choose a little bit more simple terrain. So vulnerabilities. I need to make sure that you know something about me, Matt. When I am standing at the top of a really pretty line and I see just a whole bunch of fluffy snow, I tend to forget everything I know about staying safe in avalanche terrain. So I need you to keep that in mind and to keep me in check so that I don't just make poor decisions while I'm out there. Other vulnerabilities could just be like, sometimes I can be a little bit sensitive if I don't feel heard. And I need you to know that about me. Other things could be like, you know what, like I'm having a lot of stress at work right now, and I have kind of a reduced capacity to show up present and to be a great partner. And so the more vulnerabilities that we have, the more we'll want to downscale our terrain and choose more simple terrain. Any vulnerabilities we should know about from you, Matt?
I feel one of the things I have is, like, let's say tomorrow, if we're going to go out tomorrow, I have a pretty busy day. I have to be in Boulder for an AMGA event. So there's a bit of me that sometimes happens where if the logistics are going a little slower and, we're running behind schedule, that I make up for that. And that also sometimes makes me put the blinders on and charge forward when I should be keeping my head up and looking at what the mountains are telling me. So keep me in check for that.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. When I'm cold, I do the exact same thing. I try to move a little fast and then I forget everything I know. Great. Well, thank you. So then this is also the time we have to identify what we don't No. And there can be like a whole bunch of things. And so now y'all can't just sit there. I need you all in the audience to type a bunch of things in the chat of what we don't know. Like it could be terrain. It could be the weather. We might not know how much snow is actually out there. You know, Matt, I don't actually know you. Meaning I've gotten out with you. And so since we're still getting to know each other, that's another reason to dial back our terrain selection, right? Cool. Yeah, there's a lot of great things coming in the chat here of things that we don't really know yet. And it's important to know that so that we can make targeted observations in the field, right? And that'll also dictate our terrain selection because we might purposefully put decision points based on what blanks we are able to fill in, like, hey, oh, there's more coverage here than I thought. Maybe we can continue on to plan A, things like that. Anything to add, Matt?
I think, yeah, like a lot of people are chiming in here with about what the current snow conditions are. That's a lot of questions in terms of like, is there coverage? Is there rocks? You know, and is my gear all ready for the year? That's an unknown for me. I haven't made my routine of tightening all my Splitboard bindings and making sure all the screws haven't loosened up since last year when I put it away all muddy.
Totally. I have no idea where my repair kit is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Cool. So yeah, now that we've identified all these really important things, we have a better idea of what terrain we should choose. So yeah, like I said, the idea is the more we don't know, the more vulnerable we are, the lower our risk tolerance is, the less able our abilities are, and the more simple terrain we should choose. So it sounds like we're going to keep it pretty simple tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, I will go ahead and take over screen share then, and let's start planning a tour. Dive into, oh wait, are you going to share your mobile first?
How about I do that at the end? I'll do that when we go do the mobile thing.
Great, that sounds great.
Cool.
Sounds good. So can I please get a thumbs up as to if you guys see my map? Yep.
I can see it. Yeah.
Awesome. So first things first, we decided that we wanted to check out what birthedpass has to offer. So I'm just going to type in birthedpass up here. I'm actually already there, but I wanted to show you guys kind of how to zone in on your spot. And this is the pass. And that's where we're going to start. So I'm just going to kind of give you guys a lay of the land. I'm on the web browser, and that's going to be slightly different, but all the same features as the mobile where Matt is going to demo later. But first thing that I want to show y'all is this feature up here, this snow mode. We want to make sure we're on snow mode. There's also mountain bike mode and hiking mode. And we are focusing on snow today. And there's all sorts of activity types that we can select. And when we select ski touring, that's when we get access to all this awesome beacon guidebooks data. So if you're not very sure about, you know, what to ski in a zone, this is an awesome place to start. Obviously, not all zones have beacon guidebook data, more and more every single day. But this particular zone, birthedpass, Colorado, does. So when you like click on a route, you get all sorts of information over here on the side about like what that route is like. So we have the AITS rating challenging, which means there are ways to reduce your exposure to avalanche terrain, but they're limited. And then it gives you the total descent, the max slope angle, and a whole description here, all sorts of route details. It gives you an elevation profile as well as kind of like an idea of slope angles that could be found there. And then more information about, if you don't remember what challenging AITS rating is, then you can just read it right here. It tells you what the aspect is, and it lets you click on the avalanche forecast for the day right here. And then the big question mark that we know that we don't know, our biggest source of uncertainty is there even snow, right? And so it shows you the nearest SNOTEL site, which is a great resource. That SNOTEL site kind of lights up right here. 0 inches in the past 24 hours. And it looks like right here at this SNOTEL site, which is about a little bit of an east aspect, there is 7 inches of snow. So if there is any rock taller than 7 inches, then we might get core shots. And it gives you a whole bunch more information, and you can click here to go straight to the SNOTEL site if you want more information there. And then it also has photos here of the terrain, which is really sweet. And there's other ways that we'll show you here in a little bit where we can get like a 3D idea of what that terrain looks like. But having a real photo is super helpful as well. And everything, almost everything in this app is clickable. If you aren't quite sure about something, just click on it and it'll most likely give you more information. Anything to add right now, Matt?
Yeah, there's just one thing. So you'll often see eights information in the guidebooks. And earlier we talked about Auto8s versus the traditional guide decided eights ratings. They use similar inputs, but the guidebook, so when you're in a Beacon guidebook content, you see that eights label up there. And you can see those on different zones as well as different lines. That is actually sourced directly from the guidebook author versus the Auto8s platform. So just if you're curious, look into that later.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because sometimes they don't quite line up. And that's one thing that I'm not gonna stop driving home tonight, is there are always reasons for you to need Avalanche education. Basically, every single digital tool that you'll ever touch will always have inaccuracies. And that's not just onX's tool, it's every single mapping tool, but it's also like your phone. Like GPS is only so accurate. If you're trying to see where your blue dot is, or like where you are in relation to the terrain, there will always be inaccuracies. So it's very important to remember that this does not replace Avalanche education. You still need it. Cool. So we need to solve some uncertainty kind of right away, even still before we start planning our tour. So let's go to the Avalanche Forecast. I'm just going to click right there, and it's going to pop up whatever Avalanche Center's website is applicable to your zone. And for us, it's the CAIC, Colorado Avalanche Information Center. And we have a lot of green in our zones, which means the avalanche danger across the state today is low. Ideas, y'all got to work again. Why do you think it's low? Write your answer in the chat. So as you're doing that, I'm just going to type in birthedpass into the search bar, and I'm going to click on it. And so as we can see, it's really important to take a little bit of time to check out the forecast, right? So above tree line, near tree line, and below tree line, avalanche rating is low. It's really important to read this brief summary. These are your key takeaways. If you do nothing else, read the brief summary. And then if there are any avalanche problems that they are forecasting, then those will be listed here. All right. Why is the avalanche danger low? What are some answers we're getting?
I'm seeing no recent snow. I'm seeing no snow, minimal wind. And then, yeah, the snow that has fallen a little bit weeks prior has settled now and consolidated a little bit.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So my best guess is that there's just not enough snow. Yeah, we're really wanting to, we can't wait for that next storm. I will just kind of address the last comment where like the snow has kind of settled. I would say that that's not necessarily applicable. It's still been quite cold, which means that the snow that is on the ground is actually faceting. And we'll get into that in your avalanche class with me when you sign up for it. But basically it's turning into this soft snow where the next storm, when it falls on top of it, will then be more likely to avalanche on top of the soft snow that's kind of, we call it rotting on the ground right now. So anyway, most likely low because we have no snow. But there's this cool feature on our Avalanche Center site where you can just toggle back in time using this date function up here to see kind of like what the snow has been like. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. There's a forecast discussion if you want a little bit more. The forecasters will give you a little bit more information. And then you can always go to the weather forecast, because that's another thing that we don't really know. Like there's always weather forecasts that can help resolve some uncertainty, but most forecasts are just wrong, right? I mean, like there's always going to be a level of inaccuracy with our forecasts too. So, but it's always good to know how many layers to bring and what we're kind of expecting, because if there's going to be like a huge dump of snowfall, then we want to know about it, because that could increase avalanche danger because it is falling on top of some pretty faceted snow. Okay, cool. So toggling all the way back to the last time we had an avalanche problem, which was November 1st, 2023. It was kind of right after our first big storm here in Colorado. And you can see that the colors were slightly different just for this one zone. And above tree line, it was moderate. And they were forecasting a persistent slab problem because there was rotting snow, faceted snow on the ground, and then there was a big dump right on top of that. And so you can see this compass rose here, and the center of the compass symbolizes above tree line. In Colorado, it's usually above 11,500 feet, and then the middle band is near tree line, and so usually about like 10,000, 10.5 to 11.5, and then below tree line is everything on the outer ring. And so what's shaded is where they forecasted this avalanche problem to be living on. And they forecasted it to be kind of on the northerly side of the compass. The likelihood is possible, small to large. And anytime we see anything that's possibly a large avalanche, we care about that, because anything large or greater is big enough to kill a person. Another thing that I really love about our website in particular is how they show you observations. So they have this Avalanche Explorer feature, and if you're tuning in from a different state, then you absolutely have observations on your site that it's important for you to check out. We just have a little bit more, I guess, beautiful representation of our avalanche observations, and they classify them by side of the compass. So this is really important for us to know, so we can see, and we can select a date range up here, so we can see kind of like what has been sliding, because the big idea is like, if avalanches have been sliding, that means they can also slide where you're going. And so you can narrow it down by your zone. We are in the Front Range zone. And then you can narrow it down by aspect if you want. And most importantly, I want to know how many of these avalanches have been D2 or larger. And that's a destructive scale. Everything's pretty clickable on our website too. So if you don't know what that means, just click on things or hover over things and it'll tell you. But D2 is capable of killing a person. So D1s are usually quite inconsequential. So when I see D1s happening recently, I don't pay attention as much unless there's significant weather changes coming. So that's just kind of things for us to look at. Looks like we don't have too much to be concerned about yet, Matt, right? But let's kind of play around as if this is our forecast today, just to keep it a little bit more interesting. Sound good?
That's great.
All right. Anything to add?
Yeah, I remember the storm. This is my backyard. And yeah, one thing too about Colorado that's super interesting is their new dynamic zone forecasting. So if you're from out of state, you might not know, but the polygons you see represented here actually change daily in a lot of areas. I forget how many actual different little polygons there are, but the solution that it actually provides is that it makes it so, like, there's one area, Marble, that I like to go into where it's right on the dividing line between the Aspen and the Crested Butte zone. So a lot of times you'd kind of read both avalanche reports and try to figure out, like, you'd synthesize them and try to figure out like what the problems were in that area that was kind of in the middle ground. So yeah, like, it's really interesting to see what CIC has done with this in terms of just splitting all the layers up. And it also makes onX a little bit more valuable in a lot of ways, because you could be looking at a zone, and when you turn on that avalanche forecast layer, you can actually just see like where your waypoints and your markers are based on the overlay on here, and then come in here and read a little bit more in depth about what the problems are. Yeah, totally. It's really sweet how they've done that. Thanks for sharing that. So based off of this forecast map, I think it's really important to
just outlined right out of the gate, while our brains are in a logical space and not exposed to stressors of the mountains, what terrain should we avoid? Like, are we going to close any terrain?
I think so.
Yeah. So based off of this forecast, if there is a possibility that a large avalanche could be produced, then we would want to close the terrain that has this avalanche problem on it, right? And so I always like to close terrain when my brain is in a good space, because that helps me make decisions once I get out there. So coming back into our map here. Let's go kind of into these layers over here on the side. So there's all sorts of tools that we can use, right? So here at the top, we can change what our base map is. I like hybrid oftentimes so that I can see kind of what the vegetation looks like, so that I can find a fun ski line. And then satellite is just no topo lines. So hybrid is a pretty cool layer. And what I really love is this recent imagery feature. So you can see that the imagery that we're looking at was between October 16th and the 30th. So not much snow going on, but you can toggle backwards. So like if you're planning a line in the future where you're like, well, I wonder what the snow coverage was at this time last year to kind of help me get an idea of what to expect for this line next year, then you can toggle all the way back to that date. So for us, let's just toggle back to where there was snow, because I just get real confused when I'm looking at terrain without snow on it. There it is.
Yeah, and in that selector too, like you might just want to show that, like the preferred base, like on the right side, where you select the recent imagery layer. You can also click in there, just below it.
This one?
Yeah. You can select like what kind of imagery you want to see. So the default and the snow like the default would be your ground terrain. The snow area will be your snowy terrain, and then recent imagery is a little lower resolution, but it will show you that more current reference. So yeah, like if your recent imagery is turned on and it's a little blurry, that's probably why it's a little bit less resolute. So yeah, and it's provided by a company called Planet, which we source the data from. So it's really cool, and it's really cool that you can actually see that terrain in 3D as well with that recent imagery layer.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for chiming in with that. Awesome. So now we have all of these layers that are really important to helping us plan a tour. So I'm not going to get into all of the layers today, but one of the most important layers that we need is slope angle shading. Now I'm gonna have you type your answer in the chat again. I'm making you work for it. Why do we care about slope angle shading? And now that you've had like 2 seconds to think, what slopes are most capable of producing slab avalanches? What angle of terrain are most capable of producing slab avalanches? Oh, I have the chat right here. Sweet. All right. What do we got?
Still, I should do a poll next time. I think there's a ability.
Oh yeah, we should do polls next time. Okay, you guys are awesome. Okay, 38 is kind of dead center, but yeah, the key takeaway here is that slab avalanches can happen in any terrain above 30 degrees. So we care about that because we don't want to get avalanched, right? So we are looking at the slope angle shading layer, and we see all of the angles here at the top. So anything green or anything unshaded is lower than 25 degrees. Anything yellow is between 25 and 30. And then anything orange or above is capable of producing an avalanche. And basically, like usually if it's like above 45, it's just like a cliff face. So if you are rowdy, then more power to you. But I usually don't target skiing cliff faces. So in general, I just avoid that terrain. That's why this is one of the most important layers that we have is slope angle shading. And then We also care a lot about slope aspect. This is a really cool layer because now we know that our avalanche problem is on the north side of the compass, right? So northwest, north, and northeast. And so when we come back to our mapping layer and look at this little compass here, those colors that we are avoiding are purple, blue, and a little bit lighter of a blue. So on those kind of colder sides of the compass are sides of the terrain that are capable of producing an avalanche today. Now we are going to pretend that we're gonna like leave this avalanche forecast now, okay? And we're gonna come back to just today's avalanche forecast, which is low with no avalanche problems. Because we're talking real, like where are we gonna find snow? Because if we're avoiding these slopes, those are also the slopes that have snow and the rest of them just don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's one of the things, like definitely looking at the forecast right now is like, of course, those are the ones that could be a problem is because those are the only ones having snow on them right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So our tour planning gets a lot harder if we're avoiding that because there's just no coverage. And that's why we're just going to get back to the real forecast and we're going to choose slopes that have snow on them. So the slopes that have snow on them are the north side of the compass and the east side of the compass. So if we come back here to this compass, now we're getting into more of a teal and a yellow. So anything basically cool colored are the sides of the compass that we're expecting to find snow on. Now, why is that? Why would we be expecting snow on the north aspects and the east aspects? You got to work. Get your answer in the chat. I love it. Okay.
We're seeing it. Sun, more shade.
Yes.
Sun exposure, yeah, angled sun.
Yeah, y'all know so much. Okay, so there is less sun exposure on north aspects, and there is sun exposure on east aspects, but why is there more snow, even though it's not necessarily designated as a cold aspect? You gotta work. I'm not seeing the answers here. Yeah, exactly. So most wind comes from the west, which means it carries snow with it and deposits it on the east. And so this is why we are actually going to be targeting north and east aspects because we know that there's most likely going to be snow coverage there. One of our goals was to not get a core shot. So we gotta stay true to that. Awesome. There's the Auto8 layer that we're going to check out later after we're done tour planning as kind of just like an extra layer of truth to kind of line up our decisions against. And that's what I will show y'all. And then later we'll talk about TerrainX as well. Do you have anything to add before we kind of just dive in?
Let's dive in.
Okay, sounds good. So I do like to have just slope angle shading on at all times because I need to avoid terrain that's steeper than 30 degrees. All right. So we want the north side of the compass and the east side of the compass, right? So we have already identified a lot of vulnerabilities. We've identified that we have a low risk tolerance. We've decided we need to keep it simple, even though the avalanche danger is low. So I'm going to come up here to build a route, and I'm just going to put some options on the map. Okay, so the first one that I see right here, this looks like super simple terrain because if we see that shading there, that's under 25 degrees. And then there's a little bit of yellow in there, which means it might get up into the 30-degree range. So I think that this is a very simple, oops, sorry, let's go back. I just clicked that undo, which I use a lot. I get really clicky. I'm going to go to point draw instead so that I can just start my top of my line here. And then I'm going to end it where it looks like right above where it starts to get steep. And then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to make it blue because I think that stands out. And we're going to say, let's just say this is our backup option because it is an undeniably safe ski line. backup option and save. Cool. And it's also a good idea to kind of keep our whereabouts that the parking lot is right here. So let's go ahead and add a waypoint at the parking lot so we know where we're starting. And I'm just going to say trailhead. Save. Cool. So now so how do you know where to put your up track? Like, how do you know where to put your skin track? Your answer should be, oh, just turn on the Beacon Guidebooks data. But we are going to pretend like we don't have that at our fingertips, but also all data, like all technology has inaccuracies, right? And we can't just use any one tool as our one source of truth. We have to actually know the thing too. So we already had someone say the meadows. The skin track will already be there. That's probably true too. But how do you know that the person who set the skin track knew what they were doing? I gotta tell you guys, that's my biggest pet peeve is people following skin tracks, just assuming that the person ahead of them knew that they were like, what if they had a high risk tolerance and you don't? What if they were accepting like possibly becoming involved in an avalanche? So please do not follow skin tracks just because. Make sure that you're also doing it because you've also planned a good tour. Okay, so your skin track. So we're thinking of a game of odds. Your exposure to risk is heightened the longer you spend in consequential terrain, right? So you are moving much faster on the downhill than you are on the uphill. So if you are deciding that you have a higher risk tolerance in a day, then you should choose to travel in consequential terrain on the downhill, but you should always have an unquestionably safe up track. So we are going to choose terrain that is unquestionably under 30 degrees. So I'm going to find another tool here, go to point draw. We're going to start at the at the parking lot. We have to cross the highway. That's actually one of our greatest risks of the day. And we are going to come into some low angle terrain, and we're just going to kind of work our way up this slope. And we're going to stop there. This is going to be our up track. And let's make it pink and save. Does that feel like an unquestionably safe skin track, Matt?
It looks pretty good. I mean, judging by, I'm looking at a couple things here. The slope angle seems pretty mellow. And then, the tree coverage looks decent too. There's a handful of little trees spattered there that, but then the other thing too is the lack of overhead hazard. Like, it doesn't appear that we're going underneath any like large bowls or anything like that that could also catch and carry us.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And I'm going to just zoom in here. Like, I really like onX because it has like a really kind of fluid slope angle shading, which means that which really helps us use our brains also, I think. But as you can see, like basically anytime you see yellow or orange kind of spattered in, because of resolution inaccuracies, you can almost guarantee that there's going to be terrain that is steep enough to avalanche nearby. So we always want to, when we're planning our tour, we always want to think about margins and building in just a bigger buffer. So I did draw my line kind of close to this little section. So on a high avalanche danger day, I might be cutting my margins a little close, and I might want to honestly just like move my line around it and give it just a little bit wider of a margin. So that's just something to think about. Luckily, we have a pretty low angle day, a low avalanche danger day. So I feel fine about where my line is. And it's also not like you have to stick to your line that you've drawn, because it's very important that you are also reading the terrain once you get out there. Cool. Generally, when we're looking at tree coverage, thanks for bringing that up, Matt. Tree coverage can often give us an idea of how frequently avalanches run through that terrain. In this scenario, it doesn't, this isn't a very good piece of terrain because this is not avalanche terrain. This used to be a ski resort, didn't it? So they might have clear cut a lot of that vegetation, and wind also affects vegetation growth. So that's not a very good example. But when you look over here on the other side of the pass, we see these clear fingers coming through, and that gives us an idea that there's no trees in there. And that tells us that avalanches might run through there a lot more frequently. That's also a bad example because it's kind of low angle. Let's see. Here's one. Yeah, like right here, this gully feature, avalanches run there all the time because there's a lack of vegetation. But when you start to see like a smattering of trees in here, that gives you an idea that avalanches might not hit this part of the earth as frequently. So it's always important to look at vegetation, not only for avalanches, but also because it's just more fun to ski through terrain that doesn't have a bunch of trees in it. So that's also important. Cool. So there's like an unquestionably safe route. So what, given the avalanche danger is low, maybe we realize that we have a little bit more time. We need another option, right? So an option could be just lap the meadows. This is called the meadows. I saw somebody comment that. And another idea could be to find another thing to ski, right? So we have a low avalanche danger day. Otherwise, I wouldn't suggest this. But as you can see over here, there's a little bit orange coming through the slope angle shading here, which means if we were to travel in that terrain, our margins would be tighter, right? We'd be closer to terrain that could possibly avalanche, and this would not be appropriate for a really high avalanche danger day, right? But given the forecast, what do you think, Matt, about making this kind of like our plan A option?
Well, yeah, I mean, the forecast is lower, which gives us a little bit more of a window to ride steeper terrain. But, I think also like looking at the terrain, especially like when we get out there, like it's really good to have backup plans as well if like we're noticing any instability, and also kind of experiencing different things while we're out there that make us say, hey, you know what, like maybe we should stick to the flatter terrain.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I like to think about it is you identify the terrain you're avoiding when you have a good brain space while you're comfortable drinking your coffee. And you cannot open closed terrain ever. If you have closed that terrain in the morning, you can never open that terrain. However, if you have opened terrain in the morning, you should always be actively seeking reasons to close it once you're in the field. Actively seeking reasons to close it once you're in the field. And so let me describe a little bit more about what I mean with that here in a second. So I'm just going to kind of draw this line here as an option. And okay. Cool. So if you guys have ever been to avalanche.org, they have a really cool tutorial section that I highly recommend for anybody in the audience who's never had avalanche education, or you're waiting on your course maybe this season. Check out their tutorials. It's a really good starting ground. But anyway, we are going to head up here to red flags, because we need to know what red flags of increasing avalanche danger are, so that we can be aware while we're in the field of reasons to close terrain. Okay, recent avalanches, right? So when you see another avalanche in the field, pay attention to what aspect it's on, like what side of the compass, and pay attention to the general elevation band, because the idea is if an avalanche can happen right here, then it can also happen at the same aspect and elevation over here. So it's really, really, really important to pay attention to that. And that's also why it's really important for you to keep this slope aspect layer on at all times on your mobile app in the field, so that you can know exactly what aspect you are on in relation to the avalanche danger and in relation to any red flag, any avalanches that you might see. signs of unstable snow. So basically we see some cracking, kind of breaking away from snow that's been impacted. And anytime we see cracking, that's an indication that there is a slab, a cohesive slab above a weak layer of snow. And that is the recipe for a dangerous avalanche, the avalanches that we care about. So when you see these cracking, that is a sign that you should seek lower angle terrain. Also, you might hear woomping, which is like a low toned settlement of the snowpack. And what a woomph is it is an avalanche, but it just didn't slide because the terrain wasn't steep enough. So if you ever hear those like really almost inaudible woomping, collapsing of the snowpack, pay attention to that.
It's my favorite scary onomatopoeia is woomping. You'll know it when you hear it.
Heavy snowfall or rain or wind. The snowpack does not do well with big new loads of snow on top of it. So heavy snowfall or rain adds a lot of weight, and so does wind. So anytime we see that, then we want to be more aware. And then rapid melting. When there's a lot of warming, what happens is the grains in the snow lose cohesion and they are more susceptible to avalanching. And then just as a rule of thumb, anytime you see a persistent slab avalanche problem in the forecast, that is a red flag because they are super hard to forecast, very unpredictable, and a very good reason to dial back your terrain selection, which is makes me wonder why I live in Colorado because we almost never don't have that. So anyway, these are all just things that you might see as reasons to close open terrain while you're in the field. So you should be actively seeking ways to close terrain. Cool. So let's say that is our like plan A option. And the exit getting back to the car might be kind of spicy. So I'm gonna actually go here to 3D mode. And I want to show you guys, what this looks like. So what is this? What kind of terrain is this right here? This is called a gully. And we care about gullies. Why?
You want me to answer the chat answer?
I need the chat to answer. Yeah, they're terrain traps. Cool. What's the definition of a terrain trap? A terrain trap is a piece of terrain that can increase the consequences of being involved in an avalanche. So a gully is a terrain trap because snow can pile up deeper in a gully. A cliff is a terrain trap because that's going to hurt when you fall over a cliff. Trees can be terrain traps because that can cause a lot of trauma to your body as well. Road cuts, like sudden abrupt change in slope angle, is a terrain trap because snow can pile up deeper on there. There's all sorts of different terrain traps that you need to be aware of, but that's what I'm bringing up right now, because if we went with our plan A here, not only would we have to travel underneath some pretty steep terrain to get back out to the car, but we'd also be traveling in a terrain trap. So are there options to reduce our exposure if we were to carry out this plan? What do you think, Matt?
I think so. I mean, we would definitely want to avoid that terrain trap. And it looks like there might be an alternate route utilizing the slope angle layer to kind of like find a mellower path on out of there, kind of dropping into that. I lost it. Dropping into that valley and staying out of the gully.
So you think we can just give that gully a wider margin?
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, if there was gullies, if you were kind of in the gully and there was both sides were kind of acting to channel, then you'd have to worry about terrain traps on both sides and kind of getting caught in there and not having anywhere to go. But it looks like this one kind of flattens out a little bit, but
yeah.
But then at the end of the day, you still are going into another gully. So
yeah. And as we see over here, yeah, I think that if we travel out on the other side of the gully, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If we travel out on the other side of the gully, that would give any avalanches a wider margin. And so if it's like an extreme avalanche danger day, that would give us an idea that that avalanche is capable of traveling up the other side of the gully. But given that it's a low avalanche danger day, I think it's smart to reduce our exposure, but we don't need to get crazy by giving it a super wide margin. So I'd say we can exit this way. And then once we get over here, there's a lot of tree coverage over here. So we might even be able to kind of exit Currant Creek and hitch a ride on the highway. There's so many options. And then alternatively, we might be able to just kind of go back up, maybe finding like a slope up here and then exit the way we came, because our skin track is unquestionably safe, right? So if we exit the way we came, that could be an option too. What do you think?
I think it's pretty good. And I like having a plan A and a plan B instead of getting up there and saying that looks fun and just kind of going for it, especially when it comes to gullies too, right? Like sometimes you're like, that looks fun. And then getting out of there's a suffer fest and you're putting yourself at exposure and you're in terrain traps. Whereas like with our, 3D maps and kind of using the topography here, like we've identified a handful of things that could impact our travel. So
yeah, totally. Okay, cool. Love it. So let's extend that real quick. Yeah, we could just plan on hitchhiking, right? That would be kind of crazy. Oops. I tell you, I get really clicky.
Gotta go to that point draw again.
Oh, thank you.
Problem is. Yeah, so what Sarah's showing there too is like we have the ability to snap to existing trails with that snap to functionality and then kind of deviate from them with the point draw. So like a lot of times when you're traveling in the backcountry, like you may start on a access road or an existing trail. And then you can switch to the point draw and kind of navigate off trail as you're planning routes. So it's a good way to make it easy when you're following an established route instead of just like putting a bunch of little clicks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so this is kind of spicy in here. It's a little bit steeper. We are getting above tree line, so there probably won't be much snow up there, which is why that's one reason why I think that we can get away with traveling up there. We might even take our skis off during that section. But we're also kind of on a ridge line here, so we're above a lot of this steep stuff on both sides. So that gives me a little bit higher consequence, even though it's kind of a wide enough ridge that it's kind of creating its own aspect. So we want to just have a little bit higher awareness there. So we might even just drop a waypoint. There to kind of just like, let's put it like a decision point there. Like if we don't like what we're seeing, we'll just turn around. And then like, how do we know that we feel good about this slope, right? We need to actively be targeting reasons to close terrain. So we should probably dig a pit just to make sure. I am engaged to an avalanche forecaster, and I know firsthand that they don't know everything, and they rely on observations submitted from the public as well as observations that they collect themselves. And so like everything else that I'm telling you all, you have to also use your own judgment by targeting your own information. So I think that we should find a slope to dig a snow pit on. Now, question for the audience, y'all got to get to work again. How do we know where to dig a snow pit?
Okay, we're getting some answers. Similar aspect on the aspect you like to ski, similar terrain what we're attempting.
Y'all are so smart.
I also like to add William put in here out of danger. So also make sure that you're digging in a fairly safe place. You're not just hanging out in a pit and getting buried in it.
Yes, thank you so much. So yeah, there are 3 rules to where to dig your snow pit. Number 1, safe. Number 2, relevant. And number 3, polite. So hopefully you're not just throwing a snow pit in where somebody is going to want to ski later, because that's not very nice. So maybe you can find like a spot that's kind of out of the way. Ideally also not extremely exposed to weather, because it might not actually be that relevant if the line you're skiing isn't as exposed to weather. What does relevant mean? It could be relevant to the terrain that you want to ski, or it could be relevant to your uncertainties, right? Like we've identified what we don't know in the morning, and maybe we have an objective tomorrow that we're like, hey, we need to gain more information about what we don't know for tomorrow's objective. So it doesn't have to be relevant to today. It just has to be relevant to what you don't know. And so let me just go ahead and go over here and turn on slope aspect. And so we have like this tealy color, and it looks like that's a tealy color too. So I would say that that is a relevant aspect. It might be, it might be a little exposed to weather, but we can always just kind of play it by ear when we get there. What do you think about kind of that general zone for a pit?
It's fairly good.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Where should we go next? Let's truth it. What do you think? Anything else to add before we kind of like go through a couple of different features?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. So why don't we just turn on, like, as kind of a last effort, let's just check out what the AITS rating is here. Okay, so it looks like the green is keeping it simple, which means if there are any avalanches, they're very infrequent or it's heavily forested. I think we did a good job of having this being our backup option, and like worst case scenario, we'll just lap it and go home. And then it looks like we are getting into some blue terrain with this route and then some green terrain. We might have a little bit of a suffer fest in here getting out to the road, but at least it's not gonna, it's less likely to produce an avalanche. So what does the blue rating on AITS mean again? This is gonna be a hard one for the chat, but I'm gonna ask you.
Yeah.
What does it mean again?
Ask it in the chat. Also, I hear somebody had very keen eyes, speaking of keen eyes, asking about our run out layer. And a couple of those other layers that you see right there, the potential release areas and the run out zones. Those are two inputs into the AITS layer that we created. And they're a little more technical, so I didn't carve out time to talk about them here, but stay tuned. Like those are going to launch in conjunction with the AITS layers, and we'll be educating surrounding them as well.
Yeah. Love it.
And the people saying challenging, you are correct. Blue is challenging, black is complex.
Nice. And what is
challenging? Red is extreme.
Nice. What does challenging mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. I just clicked there and it came up with the answer right here on the screen. Exposure to well-defined avalanche paths, starting zones, terrain traps, or overhead hazard. And the key thing that I like to take away from this is options exist to reduce or eliminate exposure with careful route finding. That's important for us to know. So if we're careful through there, we might be able to. Cool. So there's our AITS layer. I think that that really helped me kind of gain a little bit more confidence in my tour. And then why don't we check out this terrain next, because it's so sweet. Cool.
You want me to introduce this a little bit, one?
Yeah, sure.
Sweet. So TerrainX is a pretty cool feature. It's kind of, we kind of consider it a beta feature at onX. And we pulled some technology from the Hunt vertical to create this one. But it's kind of like it lives off of onX Backcountry, so it's a little bit of a different experience, but it's a really cool way to start visualizing terrain. And Sarah, like you can actually take it from here. You can actually input your slope angle, your slope aspect, and your elevation band, and it'll highlight terrain that meets that criteria.
Yeah, cool. So this is really important. We can overlay the avalanche problem on the terrain. So if we're going back to the November 1st avalanche problem that's no longer accurate for today, we can kind of identify terrain that's above 30. And if it's like a super high avalanche danger day, we know that there are resolution inaccuracies of slope angle shading and all things. So super high avalanche danger, you want to build in margins, right? And so you might even like choose like 25 and above just to make sure that you're giving any seat terrain a wider margin. But for today, we're just going to keep it right on that 30-degree mark. And then we know that the avalanche problem exists on the northerly aspects, sides of the compass. And then that is going to be near and above tree line. So we're going to kind of go to this 10-5-ish zone. Again, give yourself more of a margin on higher danger days, and that might mean lowering that elevation to anything above 10 or something like that. So you can see all of the here on white is terrain that's capable of producing an avalanche. And this was our decision, one of our decision points here. And our terrain that we were going to ski was right over here. So it looks like that problem would exist on a day like today. Sorry, on a day like November 1st. And then another really cool thing to keep in mind with this layer is the viewshed analysis. And I think there are a lot of reasons that the viewshed could be really cool, but two important reasons could be like filling in uncertainty. Like, hey, I don't even know what our line's going to look like. Does it have snow coverage or has it avalanched? Because like if it's already avalanched, oops, sorry, if our like proposed objective has already avalanched, it won't be as fun to ski. But we want to get eyes on, like maybe we want to get eyes on our objective before we even commit to it, before we're like standing right on top of it and already like in a mental space where we're not willing to bail. So we might want to just like see where we could have eyes on it. And then like this would give us pretty good eyes on it. And then we can come over here and place a waypoint right there. And that waypoint will transfer directly back into our map. So we can kind of see like, all right, make sure we plan a trip, kind of a bebop out to the edge of the ridge so that we can get eyes on it. Another thing that this could be useful for is like if you're traveling on glaciers and you're not quite sure how filled in crevasses are, you definitely want to get eyes on that terrain before you're standing above it, because it can be a lot harder to see what's below you when you're above it than if you can travel below it and get eyes on it from below. Anything to add?
Yeah, we had a couple questions coming in about about TerrainX and some of the limitations of it right now. So yeah, like there's questions about, hey, I don't see the polygons and the lines and some of the other things we built. So the waypoints are the only thing that's sync right now between TerrainX and the standard onX Backcountry app. It's kind of complicated, but it actually is a separate, like separate platform and kind of separate stuff. So yeah, right now I kind of been using it as like a teaching tool a little bit more. But then when you are identifying terrain, you can drop waypoints and then they'll sync with your onX Backcountry account as well. Yeah.
And if you're a guide like me, I think it's really cool too to be like, hey, what like kind of view am I gonna get? Like, am I even gonna like get to see pretty things up here? And you can see like all of the peaks in the distance that you'll be able to see, which is pretty cool. Yeah, awesome. All right, well, I think we're ready to share this. So part of one thing that's really important is making sure we have consensus and making sure we're both on the same page. So I'm going to share my route with Matt to make sure that we're both on the same page and we both know where we're going. Also, redundancy is important, because if we are relying on a digital tool and our phone dies in the field, then part of our backup plan is like, hey, my friend has the exact same route on their phone. I also carry a battery because of that. So let's go into my content and I'm going to add a folder. Call it simple tour with Matt. Okay. And there's a couple different ways that we can do this, but I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to add content here, and I'm going to go through and find my map items that I have labeled.
Yeah, and you can also click the geometry directly on the map if you want to click it that way as well. Yeah, I've been getting obsessed with data management in terms of like making sure like I'm naming things in particular ways and organizing them in folders. It can become pretty overwhelming as you start building out custom maps.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So it automatically selects it.
Yeah, and you can see it kind of like light up a little bit white when you have an object selected.
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you. I learned so many new things. Can I add multiple things at a time?
Yeah, just click everything, and then when you hit done, it'll add it all to the folder. So like just click everything in here that we built today.
Nice.
It should be, I think maybe you missed that other line of like the northmost line.
Oh yeah, that was a
That was a different one.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't remember
yeah, we didn't do that one.
that. Okay,
Cool. Great. So now I'm going to share this with you. Anything else
cool.
to add?
No, yeah, this will be great. And then I'm going to walk through like how to make sure that like I have this on my phone and that I have everything downloaded. So we'll go into that in a sec. But yeah, in the meantime, drop this link into the chat so everyone can pull into their onX account.
Okay, perfect. Copied. Come on down here. Boom.
All right, there it is. I'm going to
Cool.
slowly import this into my own account here. And then I'm going to take over the screen share. Just give me one moment to get my ducks in a row.
Yeah, totally. And then the last thing that I want to say, I've already said this, this isn't a substitute for Avalanche training. Just because you have like a line on your map doesn't mean that you're safe. And so it's really important to also have a good understanding of terrain ID when you're in the field. And so avalanche.org has some cool tutorials for that as well, identifying avalanche terrain, but highly recommend taking an avalanche course as well so that you can be aware of anything that you might have missed during your tour planning session and find more reasons to close terrain once you're out there.
Awesome. Sarah, thank you so much. That was awesome. And now I'm going to run in, we're cooking. So I'll run into just like how to import this file into your phone, as well as just like how to make sure you're ready to go in the field. And then I'll give just a little bit of like context in terms of like the app experience, because I know a lot of people may not have used this app before. So I'll share my screen. Hopefully you work for me today. Let's see. All right. Can you all see my cell phone? Yep. Cool. Awesome. So I actually kind of missed a step. I did a little too early, but when you click on that link, like let's say Sarah texted me that link, it'll open up a message. It'll open up onX Backcountry. It'll open up a message that'll say, hey, do you want to accept this data coming in from Sarah? And you could say yes. So you can actually see this is the folder right here. Oh, yeah, right here. And if you click on it, you can start opening up all the different stuff. So you can see, here's all the waypoints we created. You can see it's shared by Sarah. And one of the things I like to do too is you can, again, about data management, you can use these top two toggles to either hide the folder on map or show only this folder on the map. So like I have done so much touring on birthedpass and all around that like sometimes it can be really confusing. And also like I also am kind of worried about like if I hide this like thing, I might not be able to find it again and you know, whatever. So like if you want to hide it, you click this top one. But if you want to just show this content on the app, you can click this one and then you can pull it all in. So I'm just going to jet over to the area and then bam, you can see all the content here that we just built right on my phone. And you can also click this button right here, see it in 3D, get a better lay of the land, etc. And then I'm just going to show you the last step before I kind of go into a little bit more of an orientation is downloading an offline map. So before you head out on the trail, like it's essential that your phone, you've downloaded this area. So every area that you want to be in is encompassed within these maps. So down here, there's this offline maps button. Click that. And you want to create a new map. And then you can see I'm starting to pan around. You want all of the information to be inside of this square that you want. And you can also change your resolution from low, medium, or highest. I always find high is kind of the right for me. And then too, like you're seeing how small this little box is. And the fact that they might not all fit in there. If you do like your 2 fingers zoom out, you can actually expand that area. It actually does have a limit in terms of size. Let's see how far it lets me go. So like there is a limit. And if you run into this limit, you can just download 2 offline maps. But you can see like with how big this area is, a 17 by 24 mile radius, it's going to take up a lot of space on your phone. So 1.3 gigs to download this map. I think I'm only going to need this is a pretty short tour. So I'm just going to keep it to what we have. Click here, hit next. This will give you the ability to title your map. Again, with the data organization, we can call it birthed. And we'll save it. And then we wait. Make sure this thing all downloads. And that was actually pretty quick, which is great. What I always do before I go out of service is I test to make sure my offline map is working by hitting this go offline button. So also when you're in the backcountry, I prefer putting my phone in airplane mode. That limits your battery drain when you're out of service. So it's not just like continuously trying to ping a radio tower, but it also will limit your interference with your beacon and put less radiation into the air. So now that it's offline, this is actually simulating what you'd see in an offline mode with airplane mode. You can actually just turn on airplane mode too if you want to toggle on this experience. And then I always just verify, like, are these topo lines crisp? Is all the content I want included in here? And this is simulating what it would be like if my phone did not have service with this app. And then you can also toggle between your layers. So like, here's your layer selector right here. So you can turn your satellite, your hybrid. I'm actually going to change my default imagery to snow. Did that work? Hold on, why didn't that work? Oh, I didn't click it correctly. What? Okay, technical glitches. This is why you make sure everything works before you go out of service, but all of your other stuff will work as well. I'm not sure about the aerial for some reason there, but like, let's say you want to turn on your slope angle, turn that on, and all this will be able to work offline as well. So like, you can toggle on and off your slope angle and your slope aspect layers. Go back to my topo here and just make sure that the resolution's high, that you can actually read these, that it's all working. And so you can use this confidently when you're out in the field. Because when you have this offline map downloaded, I'll just zoom to where I am now, you'll have a little blue dot that can follow you around and, you know, help you get orientation on where you are. So I'm going to go over the Birthed really quickly. And I just want to give, like, I know we kind of glazed over some of the very introductory stuff on like what buttons do what. So I wanted to give you that in a mobile experience. So first thing right here is your activity selector. This is, I think, the most important place. So you click here and you have your different activity modes. There's trail, which we were just on. There's climb, there's mountain bike, and then there's snow. So for this particular day, we're looking at snow. Toggle that over. And actually, like, between those different layers, when you're toggling between these activities, it actually uses the preset of like the map layers you had turned on last time you're in there. It's like, for me, in this time of year, when you're switching between hiking and mountain biking, it will automatically toggle on a bunch of layers, so you don't need to jump into this layer toggle and make sure they're on. So the other one I think is really important is the layers. So these are all the layers we've been talking about, as well as those 8 layers. So, and when you toggle between these two, it actually puts the snow layers a little bit higher versus in the trail mode where they're kind of shuffled differently. And you can actually turn on all the summer and the winter layers concurrently with the new redesign that we've done. So you can see everything in here, such as trail slope, government land, private land. And then these are some of our summer layers, like active wildfires, air quality index, historic wildfires, etc. And if you're ever confused, there's a button right here that says map legend. This is a really useful place if you're confused about the content types. You can actually see a bunch more context about what some of these other icons on the map are. You also have weather widgets right here. So if you click on these, that's actually pulling me right now in Carbondale, but you get your current weather, you know, some other information, your sunrise, your sunset times, as well as your weather forecast, your hourly forecast, your moon cycles, your moon phases, etc. And if you're interested in just kind of like starting from scratch and saying like, I don't know where to even start here, that's where some of this other stuff comes into play. So Discover will actually it'll cater based on your current experience. So like, we're in snow mode right now, and this will pull up all the guidebooks. So when you click these, this will give you a full list of like all the guidebooks we have. And notice too that we're actually like putting the avalanche forecast, some SnowTel data right here in front of you, so you can kind of look and see some current conditions and you know, make a decision based on the avalanche danger in your terrain, as well as bombarding you with these signals, so you're not ever surprised by the avalanche forecast being higher than you'd expect. So where's Birthed? Am I close to it? We'll go to Birthed.
At the very top.
Yeah, so when you go into Birthed, this is your experience where you can start like navigating a little bit. If you like lower the map a little bit, it'll actually pull you out, and you can kind of like look at the map again and get reallocated. And then it starts talking about zones. So like, let's say you are looking for very simple terrain in terms of our 8s rating, you can actually kind of look at these areas and base your decision on kind of where to start based on the 8s rating. So if you're really looking for low angle terrain, that little 8s flag will be a really good indicator of just places to start looking and start exploring. And then, yeah, further down here, we already went over offline maps. This is the My Content section where you can see all of the folders and all the content and everything else that's in here, and it all stores in here as well when you're done. These are your tools. So everything that Sarah Mac was just showing, you can actually do on a mobile device as well. You can build routes, you can draw lines, you can draw area shapes to close out terrain, etc. And then it'll all go nesting into your content section. And then there's also a tracker. So when you turn this on, it'll actually draw a breadcrumb behind you. So as you're navigating, you know where you've been, and it can help guide you. And then also when you're creating a track, it'll actually save a piece of content in the My Content section when you finish it. So that way you can revisit previous tours and have that beta from the past. I think that's all I wanted to go over for mobile. I'm just looking in the chat real quick to see if anything's coming in before I leave, but looks all right. And we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end.
Awesome.
So cool. Man, we've been doing a lot. So here's your last chance for the onX Backcountry Masterclass exclusive offer. If we wowed you, click this link right here, save 30% on a new Backcountry Premium or Elite membership. And then flip to the next one. Here it is, your last chance for the giveaway. I'm actually going to start compiling the list right now, and we're going to draw winners in about probably 15 minutes here. So here's your last chance. Join in here, and I'll start putting that together. All right, so
Next slide.
finally here at the Q&A. I'm trying to open it up and get a question for Sarah Mac so we can... Actually, Sarah, is there any questions that are coming in that you think are the good ones to hit on?
Let me see.
Let's see. Yeah, if you guys want to throw some questions you have into the chat right now, that would probably be a good place for us to get started.
Yeah, throw them into the Q&A section so they don't get lost.
Yeah.
Is AITS data only available for the areas with preloaded guidebooks? For example, no guidebook data. Would that mean there's also no AITS data?
No. So like right now we're validating AITS with Avalanche centers a little bit faster than some of the guidebook partnerships we've been going on. So you will see AITS data in a lot of areas that don't have guidebook content. But again, those guidebooks have the AITS rating that's submitted by the author. That was kind of what I was just showing there. When we're going through the guidebook and seeing the simple, complex terrain, etc. So yeah, like it's kind of a yes and. Because there will be AITS information in a lot of areas that there is not guidebook content. And that also goes for similar, like less traveled adventures as well. Like there's so many mountains to ride that are outside of guidebook zones, that, you know, like you'll be tempted to explore things that are not written up in any guidebook. And hopefully the AITS layer will be there to help guide you.
Are you familiar with the AVI risk features of Caltopo?
I'm actually not that familiar with that one.
I'm not either.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think these look.
I like this one that I just saw. That's any tips on finding parking zones when going to an unfamiliar zone? I think sorry, I'm trying to pull the winners here, but my advice for that one is you know, our guidebook content does a really good job of trying to educate on where you can park responsibly. And a lot of areas, that's going to be a huge challenge coming up as the sport gets more popular and more of these areas become more popular. So like definitely try to read those descriptions, but also like you have the ability to like use the satellite maps and get really close and see like, you know, look at a different zone and say like, all right, how many potential areas are there for me to park? Like how many cars can fit at this trailhead? And like kind of use your own information to get a better idea of like what those areas look like. Yeah, that's my advice on that one.
Sometimes I'm sorry if you already just said this, but sometimes I also just turn on aerial imagery and I like visually look at, okay, that looks like a parking lot. I should park there.
Yeah. And it's also important to note, like, you know, just being really respectful for that. And also looking at the maps and saying like, okay, when it snows a significant amount, like, is this parking going to be more limited? Right. Like, so. Yeah.
Oh, I like this one. There was a part of the route that I was designing that said challenging in its rating, but the max slope angle was 20 degrees. So it's not only what that route is, it is also in relation to like what it could be going under or what it could be near. So that would be my best guess as to why it would still be rated challenging terrain, but the max slope angle was 20.
And I think that's one of like the things that AITS is really trying to solve is like the, when you're looking at slope angle and seeing that as like a source of truth, it kind of like, you might put blinders on about some of the other like things at play there. And I think, I don't know what in particular you're talking about, but definitely I think the overhead hazard is one of the things that probably be, the best, probably the reasons that terrain was more, and then probably also the lack of tree coverage in that area.
Any of this info available in Canada?
We are working on it. So hopefully soon. We at ISSW were hanging out with the Canadian Avalanche forecasters, and they were very excited and wanted to work with us. So hopefully they do. And I think like Canada's been awesome too, because they've really, I mean, they implemented and designed and have adopted AITS. So it's honestly, it's been around for a lot more and has a lot more context in Canada than the US. So I'm really excited to kind of like help level it up and to continue to build a layer that I think is going to be really useful for everybody.
And then this is on onX, the AITS layer is on onX Elite only and starting early December.
The AITS layers will be on Premium and Elite. So the features, just to clarify, the features that are included with Elite, the number one feature that we have for Elite is the private lands data, which we actually didn't go into today, but you can actually see physically like where property land boundaries are and who owns them. That's like the number one. The number two is that recent imagery feature. So if that's really important to you as well, that's covered in the Elite program as well. And then TerrainX is also an Elite feature. So those are the big three now. AITS we're rolling out for everybody. And if those main features aren't relevant to you, the Premium is the $29.99 a year subscription. Actually, it's less than that with the discount that was shared in here. Man, you guys have so many questions. I had a question about uploading route files. You can upload GPX and I think KML files into onX Backcountry. I'm not sure about KMZ. I have to triple check. But like, yeah, we're trying to make it easier and easier to import and to not only to bring content into your onX Backcountry account, but also to share it out. So like, that's definitely one of our goals, is to make that more seamless and easy. Sarah, thanks for flipping that over. I see some people asking where the discount is again.
Right here. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are a handful, as Chuck just said, a handful of like apps that can help you like translate the files and types and stuff like that. So info about Europe and Japan. Right now, we are a Canada and US company specifically. We're really focused on making a product that really serves these two areas first before expanding. But hopefully worldwide someday, right? But yeah, like that's definitely part of what we're working on right now. And sorry, I have a question from David. When using the Discover feature, it is pulling in spots in Colorado, even though my location's in Salt Lake. Is there a way to filter down a narrow distance for me? So that Discover experience in snow mode is pulling in the guidebooks that we offer. There are currently no guidebooks in Utah, but that is going to change soon. I forget which of the ones I have it on that sheet, what we're adding, but we are adding content in Utah soon. And then you'll start seeing that experience for you in Colorado, that you're seeing in the Colorado areas in Utah for those designated areas. There are a handful of other content types in there. So we do have a handful of like trail networks and snow content that is pulled from other resources. Like we had some from Powder Project, and we have a handful of other contributors. But we don't, but the guidebook experience is a little bit more elevated. So you'll start seeing that soon in Utah. Okay. And also I have, because we're kind of running at to the end of it here, you'll have so many questions, and I'm really excited that like you all have a lot of curiosity that has been piqued. We have a really, really awesome customer experience team. I don't know, Kobe, if you can find the link for them to send them to. I don't think I have a slide for it, but we actually have real humans, a lot of them in Montana, that if you call us, they will pick up and they will nerd out on maps with you, and they'll figure out your problems, and they'll be able to kind of like put your use cases together. And so, yeah, like reach out to them. They love to chat. They will be just as excited as you are to talk maps. So, well, cool. Yeah. And I think we should draw the winner right now.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So let me share the screen. We're going to spin the big wheel. This is going to be so fun. I'm so excited.
Okay.
So again, thanks to Weston for giving us a pair of skis or a split board to raffle here. Their boards, their products are incredible. Like Sarah, you ride for Weston.
Yep.
I have ridden many a Weston. I love their products. I think they're really great, and they're really purpose built for backcountry. So, thanks, Weston.
Yeah, they're my
And
favorite.
without further ado, I hope this actually works and is fun. All right, spinning the wheel. David Swisher, are you here? Chime in the chat. Give us a yoo-hoo. I don't know. I don't see if you're here. David, yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. David,
Right
I'll be
on.
shooting you an email. I'll be shooting you an email here after the thing with steps on how to redeem your board. Or skis. I don't know which way you swing. But yeah, I'm really excited. Congrats. It's going to change your life, I promise.
Let us know if you have any questions about the equipment.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we've been here for a long time. Thanks to all of you for sticking around for such a long time. Like, we really, really got into it. There's a lot more to learn. We have a lot more to educate on. Our YouTube channel, this will be up there on the YouTube channel soon. We're going to be doing these monthly where we're talking with people about maps and about route planning and about snow stuff. So yeah, tune into the next one. Tell your friends. And with that, good night and get out there and go shred.
Yay. Have fun, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time. And if we didn't answer your question, please reach out to CX. Thanks.